start from the top, to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance, the Mason District SSPA Task Force, known as Task Force, needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each task force member is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I am going to conduct a roll call and ask each task force member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. So I will start the roll call again, name and location. Robert Chamberlain.
Robert Chamberlain, coming to you from Alexandria, Virginia, and Fairfax County.
Thank you. Joshua Booth.
I'm Joshua Booth in Lincolnia.
Thank you. Jeff Longo. Not yet. Alice Wang.
I'm here in Falls Church, Virginia.
Thank you. Alice, just say your name. So we're covered.
This is Alice Wang. I'm in Falls Church, Virginia.
Good, good. Barbara Burgess. Barbara?
My microphone to work. So let's see if I can't change that.
That's good. We hear you now.
Oh, great.
So your name and your location.
Oh, Barbara Burgess, Falls Church. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Nguyen. Donna Jacobson.
Donna Jacobson, Annandale, Virginia.
William Likos.
Bill Likos, President, Falls Church, Virginia, Seven Corners, part of Fairfax.
Thank you. Ed Feig.
Ed Feig, Annandale, Virginia.
Thank you, Ed. Binod Gupta. Jan Keys.
Binod Gupta, Annandale, Virginia. Sorry.
And Jan Keys in Falls Church.
Binod, was that you?
Yes. Sorry, I was muted.
Thank you. Jan Keys, we heard Karen Geiger-Smith.
Karen Geiger-Smith, Fairfax, Virginia.
And I'm Martin Machowski calling in from Duck, North Carolina. At this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to the vice chairperson, that's Alice, so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Mason District SSPA Task Force.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? All right, the motion is passed.
Okay. Need for an electronic meeting. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels the emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communications is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the track and nomination page of the SSPA website at https://www.fairfaxcounty.gov/planning-development/plan-amendments SSPA /South /track-nomination, or by calling 1-408-418-9388, TTY 711, and entering access code 129-203-0777. It is so moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and motion's passed.
Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the Mason District SSPA Task Force's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that motion's
Okay.
passed.
Great. So we are completed with that. Let me just go back. Jeff, have you joined? Jeff Longo?
I have come from Falls Church, Virginia.
Thank you, Jeff. And Dave Nguyen, have you joined? Still missing Dave. Okay. Okay, so welcome. This is the third night of, and potentially the final night of our Phase 1 Task Force deliberations. We have 2 nominations to hear tonight. Staff has circulated both the nominators' presentations as well as a number of public comments that we have received for task force members to review prior to the meeting. We'll proceed along with the same order that we proceeded the first 2 meetings. We'll hear the staff presentation. We'll have a presentation by the nominator, an opportunity for task force discussion and questions. We'll open up the public hearing for public input and commentary, and then the task force will continue to with any additional discussion the task force may have, and to potentially vote on the nominations this evening. Any questions about the process before I turn it over to staff? And again, one more time for task force members who joined late, I'm on a smaller screen this evening. I cannot see all of you at the same time. So if you're seeking recognition, you may need to do so verbally as opposed to just waving or raising your hand. With that, I'll hand it over to staff to begin.
Right, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Machowski. First item on our agenda are a few staff updates tonight. As Mr. Machowski mentioned, this is potentially our last meeting date, depending on discussions. You all have one optional meeting date scheduled for next week. I believe it's September the 9th, should discussions run over or you choose to defer your vote. I do want to have you all pencil in some key dates. The first set of dates are November 18th and 19th. These are the Planning Commission public hearing dates. The meeting will be virtual as well. And I think, Mr. Machowski, we spoke briefly before the meeting started. It's typically customary that we have a member, typically the chair, provide just a summary of the work that you all have put forth thus far at that public hearing. I'm not exactly sure which, Graham may know a little bit more about which days the Mason district will go. It will not be Mason alone. It will be the other 2 districts in South County that will also go before the Planning Commission. Our next date will be tentatively sometime in January, and that's the Board of Supervisors date. The board will hear the recommendations from the Planning Commission and the recommendations that you all and staff have sent forward, and they will make a determination as to which nominations are added to our work program in 2021. We foresee shortly thereafter, after the board makes their decision, jumping directly into the work program analysis. To that end, we are hoping that many of you will be able to continue on in your role on the task force through the work program to work with staff and bringing that analysis forward and making a decision on behalf of the community. If there's any reason that you're not able to continue forward, maybe things have changed, let us, or in particular, the Mason District Office, Irvin Uriarty in the Mason District Office, let him know, and we'll make accommodations likewise, okay? All right, great. With that, I think we'll go ahead and jump into tonight's presentation. I won't tear your time too much longer.
Just one quick question, I'm sorry. Do you have a
Sure.
ballpark estimate for when the phase 2 of the task force work is it February, March, January, April?
Possibly February. It all depends on the amount of nominations that move forward. Staff will have to kind of structure some things, but ideally February timeframe.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see if I can figure out how to share. Hey, Graham, did you give me?
Do you want to have presenter privileges or Brian?
I'll need them for the first.
Okay.
For the first portion.
Sure.
Awesome. Can everyone see screen? All right. This front matter most of you are already familiar with, but if we have folks from the public that are joining us for the first time, we did want to talk through the screening phase that we're in currently and what this means. Right now, we are in phase 1 of a longer land development process, and this phase is noted as the screening phase. This is the opportunity for the community and staff to both weigh in on the ideas that are presented in each of these nominations and decide whether or not staff's resources going into 2021 should be spent providing additional analysis for each of these ideas. So the sole question that the task force is being asked tonight is whether the ideas that are being presented should make it onto the 2021 work program. What we are not doing tonight is rendering approval for any nomination or disapproval for any nomination. This is the first step of many leading into next year. Some of the criteria that we are asking the task force to consider, as well as what the staff has considered in our recommendation, is whether or not the nomination runs contrary to current county policies and whether any additional analysis is needed at all. If you are able to make your judgment based on the information that's provided, or if you need additional information to make that decision, we have the work program process to help with that. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first part of an elongated process. The plan amendment work program that we hope to move into in 2021 considers a much longer time frame. I know the series of meetings that we've had here in August and September have been somewhat compressed just due to the nature of things now, but we'll have some additional time to consider all of these nominations in greater depth as we move into the work program. I've already spoken to the screening phase. Under the plan amendment work program, this is where you can expect staff to bring you more detailed analysis, such as the transportation impacts for each of the ideas, the stormwater impacts, and additional impacts to public facilities. All of these ideas will be considered in the next phase. As we've already mentioned, we have one more deferral date that will be September 9th if discussions run through or run past tonight. If you're looking for additional information or you'd like to stay up to date with the process and where the nominations are, you can do so by visiting our webpage. Mr. Machowski read it at the beginning of the meeting. Pro tip, if you just go to Google and type in track a nomination for Fairfax, it should be the first listing and it'll take you to this page. You can scroll down to the Mason District Task Force meeting information link, and all of the meeting information, including a recording of our previous meetings, can be found here. Right, and as we've mentioned before, if this is your first night joining us, we've had a total of 6 nominations submitted for the Mason District. We've heard 4 of them at the previous meetings. Tonight, we're going to focus on our last 2. Both are in the Annandale CBC, and that's PC 19-MA-004 and 005, respectively. And with this, I will turn it over to Brian Botello to walk through each of the nominations. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Graham, if you wouldn't mind transferring the presenter role to me. Can everybody hear me all right? Good to go? Okay, perfect. All right, thank you, everyone. Tonight, we're going to start with nomination PC 19-MA-004, which we're referring to as the public storage nomination. It includes a single parcel on 4312 Ravensworth Road, just south of Little River Turnpike, and it's located in subunit B2 of the Annandale CBC. For everyone's reference, the aerial photograph here is oriented to the south. The nomination property is 1.76 acres in size, and since the 1970s has been developed as a single-story, non-climate controlled public storage. The units are accessed directly via roll-up garage doors. Ravensworth Road, as you can see here, forms the eastern boundary of a portion of the property, while the other portion is bounded by an automobile service station. The Messiah Presbyterian Church is located behind the public storage to the west. Besides those 2 properties, the public storage is generally surrounded by low-rise, automobile-oriented development. The current comprehensive plan for the Annandale CBC envisions a walkable community with commercial and residential development that serves pedestrians. In order to achieve this, the comprehensive plan discourages storage facilities within the Annandale CBC. Future development within the Annandale CBC is also guided by a form-based planning approach. Instead of the usual measures like floor area ratio or dwelling units per acre, the Annandale plan sets maximum building heights and recommended land uses for each subunit. For subunit B2, where the public storage is located, the plan recommends residential or commercial mixed-use development up to 6 stories in height. The nomination proposes to replace the current self-storage facility with an approximately 153,332 square foot climate-controlled self-storage facility up to 4 stories in height. The concept included in the nomination depicts a pad site, a self-storage facility located in the center of the property, surrounded by pavement and enclosed with retaining walls and a gate at the front of the property. Parking is proposed adjacent to Ravensworth Road at the entrance to the site. Onto our considerations. As mentioned previously, the Annandale plan's recommendations center around creating a high-quality mix of pedestrian-oriented uses. The existing comprehensive plan explicitly discourages storage facilities within the CBC as a primary use, as they detract from the vision of a vibrant urban community. The plan states that if storage facilities are to be considered, they should be incorporated into a mixed-use development. Furthermore, the nomination proposes that the new self-storage building be set back from the street while the parking would be located adjacent to the sidewalk. This runs counter to the previously mentioned recommendations of locating parking further away from the street and locating buildings closer to the sidewalk. By doing so, the self-storage facility would perpetuate the automobile-oriented development seen in Annandale today. Finally, the comprehensive plan recommends parcel consolidation as a means to create blocks and pedestrian connections within the subunit. In this case, no parcel consolidation was proposed, And while the nomination states the site could accommodate a north-south and east-west circulation through the property, the feasibility of that connection seems uncertain. And then it would further benefit from parcel consolidation as the minimal frontage along Ravensworth Road, so here on the left side, limits opportunity for pedestrian-oriented design. For those reasons, staff does not support adding nomination PC 19-MA-04 to the 2021 comprehensive plan work program for further study. Mark, will you be presenting now?
Yep. Am I up? Good. I get control of the screen. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.
Okay, Mark, you should have presenter privileges now, so you can
Let's see if this works there. All right. Hopefully that's working.
all good.
All right, good. Brian, Graham, everybody else, and members of the committee, thanks everybody for your time. I really appreciate it tonight. This is, as Brian said, this is regarding the self-storage facility here on Ravensworth Road in Annandale. Let me take a few minutes here, give a little more background here. Facility has been around since the early 70s. It is first generation self-storage. It is, single story, roll up, self-storage. And I want to talk a little bit about, how we got here and kind of the surrounding properties too. We have right here, we have our property and we're right in the middle of section B2. Right in front of us is a gas station. The gas station was transferred probably about 3 years ago, to a regional gas station operator. And we did talk to them approach them about consolidation. There was no interest there, planning on operating that for a long time. It's interesting. I want to say is this right now, the property sits in what's not apparent here is topography. The property sits in kind of a divot in the middle of this block here. And the only really property where it's kind of at grade, the same thing, is this gas station right here. So when we go to the side views, you'll see why this development in our proposed project really is only visible mostly from Ravensworth Road. We have this facility right here, immediately to the south. I don't know if people can see my cursor. You've got a dental office. You've got, kind of, so basically just older commercial right along here. Ravensworth's rather nice modern road. Once you turn on McWhorter Place, the first half of it is kind of the same. And then it narrows considerably and the whole character changes pretty radically. And if you've been down there, you'll see what I'm talking about. It goes almost to the level of a suburban road with kind of quasi-rural aspects to it. And right about here, the building height of the land, topography increases significantly. So you're looking at a pretty significant jump in terms of the land height around property and on McWhorter Road. And you get down to here, right here in this corner lot is a county-owned property. I guess maybe future park plan, I don't know, but it has very clearly county-owned. And you get right here, and there's no gutters, there's no curbing, it's just pavement. And there's trees kind of growing on either sides, and it gets down to about a lane and a half in terms of width. You take a right, and it kind of continues there until you get right about where Messiah Church is. Messiah Church, again, this land up here is also at a very significantly higher grade than our public storage facility is. So kind of going up, you're going about 15, almost 18 feet going there, and there's the Messiah Church. You continue as you kind of go up to Markham Street and we intersect the Little River Turnpike. Then you have what everybody's pretty familiar with on Little River Turnpike. We have a lot of, this is a local optometrist. There's some Mexican restaurants here. There's a Paisanos. It's just standard commercial that you would find on Little River Turnpike, kind of going along there. But again, all this property itself is higher than this property here. And so then you turn here and you come back down and you go down. You're going downhill on Ravensworth again. And, there's a retaining wall here and you pull into the parking lot here if you need to go there. But, you get to our site again. Our site kind of has this little pipe stem access, right? When you get into the property, show what it looks like. This is inside the property. You'll see you have all the properties around it basically higher than this property. And you've got retaining walls in the back. And so some of these properties will drain partially into our property. Some of them drain the other way, but they're generally very much higher properties. How we got to where we were was we were looking at this facility and in the process of looking at doing some upgrades to the stormwater management and looking at some upgrades to the existing buildings. And it was just going to be a building permit exercise, frankly. This property is, performs very well. And it was just going to be fixing it up. And we started looking at this and we started talking to ourselves. We looked at the comp plan. And we kind of realized, that, kind of taking the approach of really kind of first do no harm. Is there something we can do to kind of modernize the facility? Because these are not climate controlled. When you get in within self-storage, particularly self-storage that supports urbanized areas. And as we get new apartments coming in the areas, apartments are generally smaller. People tend to move their material in and out depending on the seasons. You have folks like myself, former military, who will come into the area where you could buy a four-bedroom house in Alabama. You can get a 2-bedroom place in Fairfax County. You got to downsize for a temporary bit. And then we also, these units tend to also support a lot of business. About 20% on average, the space in the outside of these facilities is rented to businesses for, storage of goods and stuff like that. So we were looking at this and we wanted to go with climate control because that's kind of the future of what happens with self-storage, as areas urbanize and, as they're kind of the accompanying, shadow boom to apartments and, urbanized areas as they start to develop. And looking to see what could we do here that would, better fit this property out for the future, but more importantly, not create an obstacle to redevelopment of the block we've got. And so that was kind of the focus on how we had. So we started taking a look at this when the SSPA process was coming up. We said, well, let's look at a proposal where we could go ahead, just scrape the property completely, come up with a new proposal, a new building that would be modern, would have modern stormwater management controls, and could be configured in such a way that eventually when the area does redevelop, would be able to accommodate, a future east-west connection interior to the block, a future northwest connection interior of the block. And so, would basically be something that would provide economic boost to the area and would provide new development to the area and help facilitate development in a block for which there's really no right now internal design, streetscape design for it. And so that was kind of what we wanted to do. And again, as Michael proposed, we're looking to propose this, we're not looking for a yes or no on the substance of the application. We're looking to see, is this something that can, at the core of it, is worth further study? Because if we don't do this, then and that's fine if we don't, but the next step is we just go ahead and we go back to doing what we're doing, and we just fix it up and it stays the way it is. But, that opportunity has been kind of lost to kind of begin the first of the green shoots in this block. So turning back to the next page here, it's kind of the same thing I said before here. So we're kind of in many ways, we're kind of the keystone to this block. We are in a situation where we're in the center of the thing. We do handle stormwater management for some of the adjoining properties that allow us to provide quality control, which we don't have. And, the goal was to modernize this, provide it in a way such that it didn't preclude development, maybe frankly started laying out the future development potentials for the property. Block is kind of fairly, square, largely. And we were looking at doing, well, what would be a typical alignment because the comp plan doesn't suggest an internal road network. So you thought, well, what if you just quarter the building, quarter the block? So you have something kind of east-west here, east-west here, north-south here. So if we did that, then this could mean we'd make this opportunity here for a new building here that would be interior in the corner of an interior block for future development of the property. Right? And that's what this looked like here. If this was to be further studied, we could look at maybe different configurations for the building, moving it this way, but the loss of this area here and the loss of this area here, maybe as part of a redevelopment, with an easement, would not prevent the operation of that. These require very few parking. We could put parking here. We could parking here. We are proposing a first floor office here. So we're looking to do some activation, but, we could also provide, future sidewalks here. So if their intersection comes through here, and that would allow kind of the beginning of a development opportunity for the rest of the area. Now, one of the big challenges you have is also grade, because you go here and you've got to jump up significantly. But that's going to be something as the area continues to develop that might be a potential for us to at least begin that process. So the next step is, again, we talked about topography, we talked about the location, the existing improvements, the solution, what we're trying to do, and the benefits. Implementation is, what I think we'd like to do in terms of our development here, providing a project that is consistent with the vision for the comp plan and kind of the first green shoot for the area. It may not hit all the criteria in terms of mixed use. We would certainly have first floor retail on there. You'd have self-storage, which is a commercial use, But, not every building in a self-storage, in a mixed-use project is a mix of uses itself. This would be allowing people to move forward, but also create opportunities for, mixed use with properties adjacent to it. So when we look at the comp plan, again, this project is sub-unit B, proposed for residential, commercial, and mixed use development. That's what we're proposing. Commercial and retail uses there. All right. We would also have providing for internal road network here, as we talked about up there. And that's part of what's important here. Looking at where would be the possible future roadway intersections, internal street grids. Right now, that's not proposed. But the logical configuration for that would basically be taking that block and quartering it. The end result would be, again, where this building here is kind of sitting in the corner of an interior intersection in the southwest quarter of a future development there. Not precluding development for anything around there. And frankly, providing these the ground places, the infrastructure, or at least the guidance for how we could eventually redevelop this area. Okay, so that's what we're looking to do here at the core of it. All right, when we looked at it, we also said, okay, what can we do to propose it? We sit in kind of a natural divot here. We would be in an area that's proposed right now for about 4 stories, 4 to 5 stories. We're proposing at 4 stories. And as we get to the elevations, we'll see how, because of the low-lying area, this property is going to be largely undeveloped. The finished projects will be largely invisible from the surrounding properties. And so it would not be anything that precludes consolidation of adjacent properties. Just no one wants to sell to us. There's no one looking to redevelop their property right now. So that's kind of where we are in terms of, recommended use. We are commercial use. That is one of the uses that's supported. We are within the height limitations, and we do provide a future street grid, pedestrian grid, and bicycle grid, for eventual redevelopment of the property. When you look at the comp plan recommendations, want to promote attractive, high quality development that exhibits the best in design. That's something, if you like the design we see, and you want to see more, we can work on that as we go further through the process. But it's certainly going to be, the proposal would certainly be a significant upgrade to most of the development in the area, and certainly above the existing project that we have right now. Would encourage revitalization, redevelopment in the Annandale CBC by creating a more attractive and functionally efficient community serving commercial and retail use. Like I said, this is the kind of use, particularly climate controlled, that supports the development of multifamily, that supports existing retail. It allows people to get, rent space for stock and supplies. So it's less expensive they can take their floor space and devote it more towards sale. Retain, enhance existing businesses. We are an existing business in the community. We've been there for over 40, almost 50 years at this point. And we're going to looking to stay there, and we are going to be staying there one way or another. It's just trying to do it in a way that helps, facilitate development for the rest of the area. Ensure land use patterns that promote stability for the neighboring residential areas. We would do that. Incorporate roadway improvements, as I said, we do that. Filling comp plan objectives. We just talked about all these different benefits that we're going to be doing. Replacing the existing development with more attractive architectural buildings, better self-storage, existing first floor retail, compatibility for retrofitting when adjacent properties come to develop, so you can provide a streetscape that meets with what the modern requirements would be. So this would probably be sidewalk right in front of these properties. Also, a big part of it is the stormwater management. Right now, it's just got existing stormwater management. This would be, and without quantifying it, we know we get runoff from adjacent properties just by virtue of the fact that some of all the properties, except for the gas station, are higher than us. This would allow for a significant increase in terms of environmental benefits for state of the art stormwater benefits, and then the interparcel connections. And so we already talked about these issues here. And then here's the site plan itself. So envision, as we talked earlier, you could move this building here as we get further through a study. Right now, we're proposing to use our existing connection here. That could be the beginning of a future east-west passageway through the property. This could be the future of a north-south. We're not now proposing parking here. That parking could be shifted elsewhere. You could do on-street parking. These uses work very well in urban environments and downtown environments where you just have minimal loading, because these are not situations where you're going to have large trucks moving up. You'll have some personal moving vehicles and stuff like that, but it's easy to retrofit these things. But more importantly, you start laying the groundwork for this thing. And then I want to talk a little bit about, we'll look here, some of the elevations we've shown. Already, the existing project is basically invisible, except for from the gas station right on Ravensworth. The finished product, as we're proposing right now with 4 stories, would only be visible tangentially from Little River Turnpike, and then when this area redevelops, it wouldn't be visible at all. It would be visible from Ravensworth, but if this area redevelops, then it probably wouldn't be visible there. Because of the grades here, it's not visible here, it's not visible there, and that's the final development that we're talking about. So, looking here's what the project looks right now from Ravensworth. All right, and this would be, again, if you don't like the design, we can talk about the design. That's what the purpose of the study process is to kind of take it through, refine it. You want more uses on the first floor, that's something to consider. But in terms of scale and the like, it fits in perfectly with what the comp plan eventually envisions. We're only talking 4 stories. They're talking 6 stories right immediately next adjacent, and we're within the limitations that they want right now for this site. Next thing, this is actually just a little further to the south, because this is the only other area to be visible here, and that's the dental office. There's the same gas station. Again, you can barely see the existing development there from right now. All right, this is what it would look like, from that site. And again, if you don't like the orange that much, reduce the orange so much. We can play with the architecture. That's the point and the purpose of this process. If we, at the end of this process, we say, no, we're not going to move forward with it, well, that kind of precludes the discussion, and we appreciate the time, and they'll move forward with what they need to do, but if it feels like an opportunity has been lost. Again, this is the only other area that it will be visible from. Right now, it's not visible from Little River Turnpike. It would be behind the trees and kind of down almost below grade right now, the existing project. And this would be what the final project would look like at 4 stories. We're not proposing to go any higher. And again, this is, as these areas further redevelop, that's going to be further blocked. But, right now, that's what you would see from there. So it's not a visually intrusive thing. It is new. It'll be modern. If we come up with a design that everybody likes, that's a nice addition to this block. And it's kind of the first green shoots for the area. So, those are some of the things we want to talk about with the rendered elevations. And now talk about, kind of what we've got in terms of actual, the current building right now. This is looking from the west, east, the south, and the north. This is the future building here. We're looking here from the east. This would be Ravensworth. That's what right now we could eliminate the windows. We could play with the design. There's lots of ways to make these buildings look like what people want to look like in the area. So we're happy to look at that. But that's about the size and the scale is what you're looking at. This would be from the interior road, the future interior road. This would be in our property here. And we looked at from Little River Turnpike. You're only looking at basically the top 2 stories on this. And then when those properties are redeveloped, you won't even see it. But you can have the ability to put sidewalks here. Maybe there's the ability that you got retail here. We got retail here. We can put additional uses or illustrations or public art or something like that. So it's available when the project, when the area redevelops, is a more compatible project that's doing assemblage along Little River Turnpike and needs to use that roadway. That's fine. This right now, this is what would be facing the back of the church, although the church is right about, their land is right about up to here. So they'll be looking kind of down on there. If you were actually on the church, it's completely invisible from Markham Street. But you could play with the elevations, come up with something. If you don't like this, we can look at that. We can come up with a better design. But again, this would be the future. Right here would be the future street, and you'd have the sidewalk right there, and you'd just have parking at the back to service the facility, or parking on the other side of the facility to service the facility. And this is future street there. But again, this is kind of designed to be scale-wise compatible, and more importantly, configuration compatible to allow future development. And then from McWhorter Place, if you got rid of those properties right there, or kind of about right up to here, higher grade, if you're on McWhorter Place, you're going to see basically the top 1.5 floors of this building. If McWhorter Place were to redevelop that property, or if you're looking at this actually from McWhorter Place, not on the property, you're looking at it from on McWhorter Place, you can't see this building at all. But at some point, there will be a redevelopment project, That redevelopment project is going to basically cut through the hill that they've got there, and they'll have to challenge that for their own engineering. But you would have your east-west connection right here. You'd have maybe some curbing here, some sidewalk here, and that would be the future east-west connection. So that's what we're proposing to do. We think at the end of the day, the challenge here is to decide whether or not this warrants further consideration in phase 2. That doesn't mean it's going to get approved, but it does mean, maybe this is presenting enough significant changes, enough significant opportunities, to maybe be the first part of new development in the area and to start laying down the groundwork for where the road infrastructure is going to be and provide the economic boost in the area and frankly, the support from the business and from the future retail residential from self-storage in terms of climate control for this site, and so to that end, we would ask your support. If you have any questions, it's myself, my colleague Tim Dugan is here online, and also Michael Valey with Public Storage is here as well. And with that, I ask you for your support, and I appreciate your time and consideration. That's all I have.
Thanks, Mark. Marty, are you?
Are there any, Binod, I know you live closest to the proposed nomination. Would you like to start our discussion process?
Sure, if you allow me to, yes.
Go ahead.
Mark, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It looks very good on paper. And I think you put a lot of work into it. You talked a lot about the block, everything about the block. You didn't go one block away front. You didn't go one block side. You didn't go one block behind. You talked only about that square block, that little square block. You didn't talk about more than 500, 600 townhouses on the right side of your property. You didn't talk about the apartment in front of your property. You didn't talk about another storage unit less than 300 feet away from your property. Talk about the 47 new townhouses that are going to be built behind your property. So what you showed us here in very sophisticated terms, that square block, just that block. You didn't talk about the neighborhood. You didn't talk about the ambience of the neighborhood. You didn't talk about what's there in the neighborhood. You didn't talk about schools out there in the neighborhood. Let me give you a few data here. There are more than 600 townhouses on the right side of your property. More than 600. I didn't count it. I just. There's a child care center less than 500 feet from your property. There's St. Michael's Catholic School not too far from that property. There's another storage unit less than 300 feet from your property. We are a residential area. If you look on the right side, it's all residential area. More than 50 years of people living there. There's already a lot of traffic on Ravensworth Road. And right now, yours is only 1 story. If it's going to be 4-story, I'll leave it up to you to decide. And like you talked about neighborhood. There's going to be 47 townhouses being built behind your property. And this 4-story, I'm sure, is going to decrease the attractiveness of the new development that's happening there. And parking, you said, when I look at the map, it's already very little parking. And when you look at the map, new map, very few parking. So what happens? Parking flows off to the street, on the neighborhood streets, where there are kids playing, where there are 600 townhouses, kids biking, kids playing. So the traffic is going to flow out in the neighborhood, and that's what I'm concerned about. it's a residential neighborhood. And there's another storage unit less than 300 feet away from you. If this is approved, who knows, tomorrow, the other storage unit might propose a 4-story, 5-story, 6-story, who knows what. And boom, we are in a industrial area. We're not in a residential area anymore. So I think what your 4-story is going to do, it does not flow with the ambience of the neighborhood. I think it's incompatible with the current surrounding of the neighborhood. He showed us everything to the whole task force. He showed us everything. It looks very good, but he showed us only that one square block. He didn't even 300 feet away storage unit that's on Backlick Road. So yours thing look good in the block. It's not good for the neighborhood. Of the neighborhood. So I just want you to address a few things. Traffic. You don't have any parking there. You said maybe they park on the streets. So what are you going to do about it? Yeah. Right? And you did and what's going to look like for the 600 residents, 600 houses living there, and they're living in an industrial area? How do you solve that problem? Thank you.
Can I respond, or should we?
One thing. Cut through traffic. I'm sorry, I forgot to bring. Cut through traffic is a huge problem. A cut through on John Mark, they're going to cut through on Jayhawk. So that's another problem, and how you would address that too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Mark, go ahead, Mark. Why don't you respond?
Okay. Yeah. I guess. Yeah. First of all, is the one thing I want to talk about. Is Mr. Gupta. Thanks very much. I really appreciate your comments. And I think, frankly, those really kind of help some of the points we're trying to make. This project, as it develops, right? If it were to go forward and further configure, if not, it'll just go and stay in the configuration it is. But right now, these projects, they serve basically within about a mile radius of all the residential. And so as residential development continues to come in here, there will be an increased need for that. Particularly, I used to have a townhouse in Old Town. We rented a unit there too. You're going to have an increased need for this thing, particularly as residential comes in. These are very, very low traffic generating uses. You're talking, 10 cars, maybe 15 cars an hour on a busy day. In these things, people come in, they spend about 25 minutes, they put stuff in, they bring stuff out, they hop back car and they're leaving. This is an opportunity to have the kind of size and scale in terms of massing, to have that kind of use that's there to support those 600 townhomes, support those new 47 townhomes, without traffic. This is, if you were to look at other uses that would go on this property, and they really wouldn't go on this property because the property ended up being just what it is right now. But if you were to go multifamily, if you would go retail, if you would go to office, all those are going to be by orders of magnitude much, much more traffic than what these uses do. These uses, work very well in an urbanized environment. And I think you bring up some really good points. How does this work in terms of traffic safety, confliction, and stuff like that? We've got a facility that's about 2 blocks north of the baseball stadium, in one of the highest growing areas in DC. And it works just very fine. It's got a sidewalk right in front of it. We've got a 14-story apartment building being built right next door. We got a 7 or 8-story apartment building right next to that. Across North Capitol Street, or South Capitol Street at that point, you have a very vibrant neighborhood that's kind of going through urban redevelopment, and people are taking units and they're redeveloping them, and they're making new units, and they're coming in and doing infill development, and it works very, very well. This is not large storage. This is not industrial storage. This is retail scale storage, and so it actually works very well, particularly, and that's the purpose of it. Why to go to climate controlled? Because if you're in the area and you want to do climate controlled, you want to do storage, you want to do climate controlled and secure storage rather than just kind of non-secure. Secure, but non-climate controlled storage. You want to have your storage typically right nearby you. You don't want to be renting a place out in Fairfax if you're living in Annandale, because you're trying to move stuff in and move stuff out at the end of the seasons. So it tends to work very, very well with those uses. When we talk about the roadway intersections that we do, and you brought some really good points about in terms of confliction movement, pedestrian accessibility. The goal here would be to have the building kind of at the corner there. So in a future block, when it comes through, you have the road going north-south and the road going east-west. We're at the corner here, and you have easy pedestrian access. You only need about 4 or 5 parking spaces for a facility this size. That's about what all they use. You'll find facilities just like this in the city of Alexandria, that look like this. There's things like this in Clarendon, exact same types of facilities. The focus really is more on how do you make them architecturally compatible so they blend in with the neighborhood. And that's kind of part of what I think we want to begin the discussion on if we're allowed to move forward here. But this will be a situation where it's a very low traffic generating use. It allows you to support those communities and the areas beyond the block. And great point, beyond just the block I was talking about. And that then is basically just going to support just those areas, just those folks within about a 1 mile radius. And that area is only going to continue to densify. We're looking at, without getting into the details, we're looking at a very large project about 3 blocks away from here in the future if we're able to get the property under contract. It'll be a large mixed-use development. Well, these are the kinds of things that help complement that. But even if that never comes to pass, you'll see enough development as the area continues to redevelop. And the apartments to the immediate north, those folks are going to need, as new apartments come in and they're smaller and smaller and smaller. People, winter, you want someplace to put your bike for the winter, you want to put your summer clothes for the winter. At the same time, you want to get your winter stuff out and move it into your apartment. It's usually very local, very, very local users that you have on this. And the other thing is also is these developments come in and you're having, a classic example is, I think there's a shoe store that we used where they went ahead and they took more of they had a lot of storage in their store and they just got rid of most of their storage and actually used more of it for floor space, because they only needed a couple examples of the shoes right there. And they put the rest of the shoes back in the building. And every morning they just get more storage and replace it. But it's a very low traffic generating use. It does work really well in an urban environment, provided it's appropriately designed, in terms of architectural screening and compatibility. And that's what we're trying to do here. We think we've got a good start, but I welcome your comments and I appreciate your thoughts.
Mark, if I might, I'd like to jump in and just add a quick comment as well. My name is Mike Bailey. I'm with the Public Storage Real Estate team, and just as quick introduction to the company, I mean, we're the largest owner operator of self-storage facilities in the world, and we have over 2,500 facilities all over the place. And as Mark was saying, with the traffic generation piece, the only public use that has lower traffic generation than self-storage is a cemetery. And that is documented by traffic engineers. This is a very, very low traffic generating facility. But Mr. Gupta, to address your comments about parking spaces, I think you bring a great point, because our existing facility actually only has 3 parking spaces outside of our secured gate. And as it's currently configured, it does create a situation where sometimes we have customers that get backed up out onto the street, and that's not ideal for anyone. In our proposed layout, we would have 15 parking spaces outside the gate and then another 13 inside the gate for a total of 28. As we've contemplated it, we would keep that gate open during normal business hours and only close it at night. So in effect, you would have 9 times the amount of parking available with new development than you would with what's existing now. And so, the compatibility with the surrounding area, Mark did talk a lot about the B2 block, but based on traffic generation, parking that's provided, and the architectural design to blend in, we really do think that it would blend in and not be any kind of disturbance to the existing developments around us.
Thank you, Mike. Before I ask if there are other task force members who'd like to have comments, Graham, do we have a number? How long is the list of public participants for this?
Right now we have one, Mr. Tim Baldwin. If there are other members of the public that wish to speak. Okay.
Are there other task force members who'd like to comment on this? Alice? Alice Wang?
Thank you for the presentation. Just one question. You had mentioned that if this proposal is not moved forward, that you would fix up the facility. What would that entail exactly? Just trying to get a sense of the alternatives. Thanks.
Right now, we have the existing facility, so basically just going ahead, renovating the facility, taking the, you wouldn't be an increase in floor space, stuff like it. Basically be what you had, but it would essentially be a building permit affair. You'd probably go ahead and put the HVAC, so we would change it to climate control. But, replacing the roof, just waterproofing it. We would probably go ahead and look and upgrade the stormwater management on the site, but that would be basically about it. It sells out, so.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Josh, did you have a question?
Yeah. So, I mean, I see how, you could improve the block, by building a new building right now. But I'm kind of concerned about, what happens in 30 years when, say, maybe we've got half the block developed. I don't want this, the middle of the block to be like a dead zone where it's just, just public storage without any other uses for it. So how do you propose to, make this building, transform with the neighborhood?
I think that's part of, I think that's part of like, the questions we're asking, why I'm saying that this maybe require, merit more study, because we have had facilities where, and we're proposing on this thing, at least 2 different sites right now for retail, but perhaps it's just, at some point we'll get past COVID, we'll go back to being a communal society and stuff like that. There will always be a use for, some form of, first floor activated uses. We've done that recently in a site in City of Alexandria, where we provide a whole bunch of maker spaces, on the first floor, and at some point, when it becomes ready for the, for that kind of uses in there, it's a primarily industrial area. It's convertible to maker spaces. Those are some of the options we could consider here. I mean, at some point, the goal is to have this kind of, as you said, sitting in kind of that corner block there, so looking at maybe those kind of opportunities, for, activate first floor activation, but the other challenge we have is, trying to predict the future. Office space was all the rage 10 years ago. Office space is really taken on the chin. Retail's been taken on the chin, so I think it's also keeping flexibility in terms of what the nature of those uses can be on the first floor. The goal is to provide some sort of activation, and so I think if you were to take this over to the next process for further study, I think that would be one of the issues you'd want to take on. And then, I would advise, and it's up to y'all, is keeping flexibility in terms of what those uses would be. So you're not in a situation where it has to be a retail use. Maybe it could be a makerspace unit, or it could be something else. But something that provides some sort of activity without putting yourself in a straitjacket in the future of cultural uses.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if this is going to move forward, we have to recommend to the county to say, we need to, add some maybe restriction on this property to make it compatible with future uses, whether making sure maybe there's, the first floor can be easily converted to commercial space, or commercial space or something like that. Just so it's compatible with like what, it's impossible to know the future, but we have a few reasonable ideas.
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I think, my hope is we can take this to the next phase and have a more nuanced discussion on this, but, right now, this decision, I think, as I understand it, and Graham, correct me if I'm wrong, or Michael, it's kind of, do we consider the conversation or do we not consider the conversation?
It's not, yes, you're correct. The one thing that I would say is that if the task force wants to do a modification to the nomination to recommend a modification, they can do that. So it's not quite a thumbs up or thumbs down being the only 2 options. An alternative can be presented by the task force.
Karen, did you have a comment or question?
I do. I have a couple questions. Okay, so you have the storage unit on Ravensworth. You also have one on John Marr, correct? Between the 2, yes. How many units do you totally have?
I don't know how many units we have, but this one's about 29,000 square feet. The one on John Marr is, Mike, do you know how many square feet it is?
I do better with number of units. I'm thinking of the housing that's in walking distance, and within walking distance, you have over 2,000 homes. And there is need for 2,000 homes to have storage.
Yeah,
so I would figure out where you are now and where you're proposing.
Yes, ma'am. I have those numbers. The facility that we're speaking of tonight here on Ravensworth has 290 units. And our completed project would take that level up to about 900 roughly. The other facility that you asked about has roughly 400 units in it. I need to double check on that, but I know that's pretty close. 350 to 400.
Okay.
And you speak of there's a demand, and of course we as a company we do a lot of market research and studies on where the demand is, and we want to build where there is a need. And I can tell you that this immediate area, this neighborhood, is undersupplied in storage compared to the national average and compared to the greater Northern Virginia, DC metro area. So it is undersupplied right now.
What's your current occupancy?
97%.
Okay.
I mean, we have a waiting list, and it's generally as soon as somebody moves out, somebody moves in.
Right. No, I'm very familiar with the Annandale area.
Even with the sub quality, product that we have there, it's old drive up product. It's not pretty, but it's very, very full.
And so there's about 2,000 units within walking distance of both of those sites. Okay.
There's 2,000 residential units.
And not to mention all the small businesses. I mean, the businesses are not necessarily walking distance, but within a mile, there are dozens and dozens of small businesses.
Are there other task force members who have questions before we go to the public comment period? We'll come back for task force discussion if we need additional.
I have a question, Marty.
Go ahead.
So we've talked about the possibility has been floated for the first floor activation of retail. So would that be that would leave you with only 3 stories of storage? What is that something that is something that you guys are would work with if this task force were to recommend this, because the comprehensive plan is pretty explicit that it about dedicated uses versus mixed use.
Typically on these kinds of uses, what you find is, and I'll give the Alexandria site as an example. Say we're going for retail or maker spaces, which are kind of typically the ones that sell the fastest or rent the fastest. It has a certain amount of depth, and so in that thing those bays were about 30 feet deep, and then behind that you had a hallway connecting the uses to their interior and things like that. So that really only takes about 1/3 of the building on the first floor, and then frankly those uses actually end up being usually tenants in the retail, the self-storage as well. So it doesn't take the entire first floor, but it certainly clads. In this case, you wanted to think about whether or not you want to have it on both sides or you want to have one side, but it's a way to kind of clad that first floor with activating uses. If you go too far deep, you get yourself to the point where you can't really rent it out. And that's a challenge too. And so, but we'd be looking here. So this would probably be 3.5 stories, of self-storage. It'd be nice, modern, climate-controlled self-storage. With the opportunity for, and again, I would encourage flexibility in terms of the uses on there, but some sort of activating use, because that's ultimately what you want. We just don't. It may end up being a dentist's office or something like that. It could be nothing classic retail being. Right now in Arlington, we're having a real problem with all the first floor retail recommendations we made in the past, and now we're trying to figure out what we can do.
Is that good?
Yep, that's that. Okay.
Graham, why don't you open up the public meeting and.
Sure. So are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this nomination? Now's your time to raise your hand. You can do that by going into the participants panel, and then the bottom right hand corner, there's a little hand. Just click that hand button and that'll let us know that you wish to speak. If you're calling in by phone, just hit *3 from your dial pad and that'll do the same thing. So we have one speaker right now. It's Tim Baldwin. So Tim, I've unmuted you. Can you hear us?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Please go ahead. We only ask that you try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes or less, if possible.
Okay, yes. So I'm the finance director and director of operations at Dental Smiles, the dental office right next door. And just give you some insight, we're a very large dental practice. We serve about 90, 110 patients a day, about 12,000 throughout the whole year. And our dental operatories face the storage unit. And currently with the current setup, we're a single story building. So we just oversee the 1-story storage unit building. So when we heard that they're considering adding more levels to the storage unit, it was a great concern for us because it would take away our sight lines, but tower over our building. And so not only would we as a business be looking into it, but the 12,000 people that we serve every year would be staring, having a front row seat, looking into a storage unit building, which would be an eyesore for the whole community. So this is something that when I saw a picture of the proposal just now, it was pretty concerning for us because it would have a negative effect on the whole community of every time someone cycles through and sees a view of a storage unit, it would be just a negative aspect. And so this is something that we're not happy to hear about or greatly concerned, and we'll get the community to fight this too, because especially with the volume of patients that we cycle through our dental practice.
Okay. Tim, thank you for those comments. Graham, are there others?
There's one additional. It's Robert Walker. Robert, can you hear us?
Robert, can you hear us?
Robert, you have your hand raised. Can you hear us?
Sorry, wrong.
Okay. Do we have someone who'd like to speak?
I think they've dropped off.
If not, why don't we close the public input and move ahead with our final discussion and determination. Mark, do you have any, want to make some final comments, Mark?
Yeah, Mr. Baldwin, just the director, Mr. Baldwin, we're very aware of, your proximity, your dental practice's proximity to the site. And, part of this project is, ultimately the comp plan is recommending larger, development. Right now we're actually trying to stay underneath that. But I think this kind of points to the question of, aesthetics, I think you bring up a very good point about, you don't want to look at just a self-storage facility, but, at some point there will be a larger development there, and, what does it look like and what does it look like from an aesthetic standpoint? And that's probably what we'd also ask is, as we go through this process, let's talk about, what elevations look appropriate and stuff like that, because it doesn't have to just be there. This is what you have here is a placeholder, but it's a massing study. All right. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Mark. Before, just for my own, just for a few comments here, it seems that, and this is a problem that you have with any small parcel onto a bigger area, in this case, the block, that, and Mark, you've made allusion to it about what might happen, what could happen, and it's difficult to, and, offering flexibility, it's difficult, however, to sort of understand, how a development such as you're proposing might fit into something that we can only speculate about now. And I think that is to some degree underlies the strong staff recommendation on this. So why don't I just get this started? I'll make a motion that we approve this, just so we can have the standard yay and nay vote. So just to be,
Can I make a small statement, please?
Let me just finish it on, then I'll let you make us. I'm making a motion to approve. When we go to the vote, a yes vote is for approval, a no vote is for not recommending that this move forward into the work plan process. So let me make a motion. I'm sorry. Let me make a motion.
Before we go to the motion, can I actually comment on it?
Sure.
Because one of the things that
Speak to the motion, you need to make it, and it needs to be seconded.
Okay, all right.
And then any of my colleagues are welcome to speak to the
Bill,
motion.
he wanted to make a comment. Let me make a motion, and then I'll recognize you, Robert, to talk to the motion. The motion is that the Mason District Task Force recommend that this nomination, number 4, PC 19 MA-004 be added to the work program. Is there a second to the nomination?
Second.
Okay, is there discussion on the motion? Robert?
No, I didn't want to speak on the motion. I wanted to actually speak on the proposal, but let's move forward with this at this point.
If you'd like to speak, Bernard, did you have your hand up? Want to speak on the motion?
No, not on the motion.
Okay. Are there any task force members who would like to speak to the motion?
Marty,
Go ahead, Joshua.
I'd like to amend the motion that if it goes forward, that we recommend the space be easily convertible to commercial or residential, if that's at all possible, and that the county plans out the entire network for that subunit B2 at the same time.
Okay, so the amendment to the, you want to make that as a amendment to the motion that the space be easily convertible to commercial or residential use?
Yeah, and also that the county plans out the road network for that subunit B2.
And the county planned out road network, I'm just writing this down, for subunit B2. Is there a second to the amendment to the motion? Is there a second to the amendment to the motion?
Can I oppose the motion?
Bernard, I'm just asking right now if there's a second to the amendment to the motion. I don't hear a second. The motion,
I'll second.
The motion, there's a second to the motion to the amendment. Are there any discussion on the amendment to the motion?
So, I mean, I wanted to say why I wanted to do this, just because, you know, like I said, I'm worried that, 30 years down the line, perhaps, this is still public storage and it's just a dead spot in the neighborhood. And, we're also talking about setting down what the roads are going to be in this unit. So if this goes forward, I want the county to plan out the road so that there's no question.
Okay. Further discussion on the amendment?
I'm wondering if the wording. I mean, this right now I have it as space should be easily convertible to residential plus retail uses, but this is a land use recommendation.
Right. The amendment to the motion is if it goes forward, if it's accepted into the work program, that the space be easily convertible to commercial or residential use, and that the county plan out the road network for sub parcel B2. That's is that correct?
That's correct. And maybe the wording is imprecise, but this is a recommendation to the county for their study.
Okay, if it's adopted into the work program.
Mr. Chairman?
Bill?
I haven't been able to finish my comment.
Okay, go ahead.
My comment was I'm not. Do we want this to say convertible, or do we want it specifically include the concept of mixed use in here? So convertible to. I mean, I just.
The language of the amendment is convertible to commercial and residential use. Okay.
If I may, really quickly, guys, Mr. Machowski, just for the task force's edification, that ultimately the board is going to be the one that puts forth the authorization and the specific language that moves forward in the authorization. So I encourage you to put forth whatever ideas you want them to consider when they're making that authorization, but it doesn't need to be specific.
Okay.
Right, and this is Clara from staff. As that amendment to the motion is written, I understand that to mean that this would be designed so that it could also accommodate a residential use at some different point in time, or a commercial use at some different point in time. And that's distinct from, was it Jeff who was asking about mixed use. So those are two distinct ideas, if that helps clarify.
Okay, thank you.
Josh, is that consistent with your motion?
That's what I intended it as, yes.
Okay. Are there any further discussion? If not,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Bill?
I'm not weighing in on the substance of the language of Josh's proposed amendment, but I am suggesting that he phrased it as contingent upon the passage of the base motion. Therefore, it would seem to me that his ideas would be as a follow-on motion after the base motion is acted upon. If it is acted upon favorably, then the group can entertain a follow-on motion along the lines that Josh proposes.
Okay, I understand your comment, Bill. As a practical matter, the task force has, for example, in the Route 50 proposal, we have allowed and we have reported forward comments by individual task force members. So if this motion does not succeed, ultimately, that Josh is able to add those comments in the comments section on our reporting as an individual task force member comment. So having said that, the motion, the amendment is Josh's amendment. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it.
Are we
Nay.
sure?
Are we sure?
Is the people want a roll call vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote. This is on Joshua's amendment to the motion. Down the list, Robert Chamberlain,
Nay.
Joshua,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Alice Wang,
Aye.
Barbara Burgess,
Aye.
Dave McGuigan,
Aye.
Donna Jacobson, Donna Jacobson.
Marty, I was just on the phone with Donna. She dropped off, but we're going to try to get her back on.
Okay, Bill Likos,
Nay.
Ed Feig,
Aye.
Vinod Gupta,
Nay.
Jan Keys,
Aye.
Aaron Geyer Smith,
Nay.
and I vote nay. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nays, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ayes. And we have one, mark Donna down as an abstention.
Marty, I'm back. I got dropped, so.
I'm sorry, Donna, we're voting on Joshua's amendment to the motion.
Okay, I vote A.
Okay, so it's Joshua's amendment passes. We're back to the base motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion before we vote? Okay, I'm going to call the roll on the motion. Again, the motion is to recommend that this be included in the work program. If you support that, you vote aye. If you don't support that, vote nay. Robert,
As amended, right?
As amended by Joshua's motion. Robert Chamberlain,
Nay.
nay. Joshua Booth,
Aye.
aye. Jeff Longo,
Aye.
Alice Wang, Alice,
Aye. Can you hear me? Aye.
aye. Barbara Burgess,
Aye.
Dave Nguyen,
Aye.
Donna Jacobson,
No.
no. Likos,
No.
no. Ed Feig,
Aye.
Vinod Gupta,
Nay.
nay. Jan Keys,
Aye.
aye. Karen Geyer Smith,
Aye.
and I vote nay. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I count 8 ayes. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nays.
That's what I have.
Okay, and the motion is agreed to. Okay. Let's move on to the next nomination. PC 19MA-005. Staff want to begin with the presentation?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, so next we are discussing nomination PC 19-MA-005, which contains 9 parcels at the western end of the Annandale CBC. 4 of the 9 properties are located within the boundaries of the CBC in subunit G1. The remaining 5 are residential properties outside of the CBC boundaries. And the entire nomination is located north of the Little River Turnpike between Hummer Road and Woodland Road. The 4 parcels within the Annandale CBC are developed with 2 mid-rise office buildings, an associated structure, and service level parking. And the 5 nearby parcels outside of the CBC are developed with single-family detached homes. Combined, these 9 parcels are approximately 9.96 acres in size. Other nearby properties within the CBC on both sides of Little River Turnpike are developed for commercial uses. And the areas outside of the CBC to the north and east of the nominated parcels are developed as single-family detached residences. And west of the nominated areas across Hummer Road is developed as townhomes. Recommendations for the nominated parcels are found within 2 separate places in the comprehensive plan. For the 4 parcels within the CBC, future development is guided by the Annandale CBC plan. As with the previous nomination, this area follows a form-based planning approach. The subunit G1 is recommended for commercial mixed-use development up to 8 stories in height. And for subunit G1, the plan also states that commercial uses should not extend beyond what is currently zoned and developed for commercial uses. Notably, the plan also recommends that development north of Little River Turnpike, which again, all of the nomination is, should taper down and to the north. Lastly, it recommends providing a significant buffer between commercial development and the residential uses to the north. The 5 parcels located outside of the CBC boundary are recommended for residential development at 2 to 3 dwelling units per acre. On to the nomination. It proposes to expand the CBC boundary to encompass the 5 residential properties and to add residential as a recommended use in the subunit. These changes have been suggested in order to allow a proposed approximately 834,490 square foot mixed-use development, which would incorporate the 2 existing office buildings and be composed of 575 mid-rise multifamily residential units, 156,000 square feet of office, and 100,000 square feet of retail. The CBC-wide objectives recommend establishing transitional areas between the CBC and the neighboring residential areas, and preventing their encroachment, the encroachment of higher intensity commercial uses into those areas. Looking further, the subunit recommendations reinforce this by stating that commercial areas north of Little River Turnpike should not extend beyond what is currently zoned and developed for commercial uses. The concept in this nomination did not establish the buffer and transitional area, and it expands the commercial uses beyond the area currently zoned and developed for commercial purposes. As proposed, the nomination may result in inappropriate encroachment of commercial uses into the residential neighborhood, which runs contrary to the vision of the plan. In the current comprehensive plan guidelines for subunit G1 also recommend orienting development toward Little River Turnpike. The assemblage of parcels in this nomination prevents that, and the concept that's accompanied the nomination depicted buildings that were oriented toward the interior of the site. And finally, the nomination proposes a residential component of mixed-use development, and that's at odds with the recommendations for the entirety of subunit G1, which the plan envisions as being developed for commercial uses. And for those reasons, staff does not support adding PC 19-MA-005 to the 2021 Comprehensive Plan Work Program for further study. Thank you, everybody, and I will pass it on to David Gill to
Thank you, Brian.
present.
Yeah, my name is David Gill. I'm a land use attorney with Wire Gill, and I really appreciate you guys putting up with the patience in this process and echoing what Mark said about thanking you for taking times away for your night to think about how these nominations work within the community. Because frankly, without a lot of participation in this feedback that we get, it's tough to figure out what might work and what might make sense. I think what Brian correctly puts his finger on is this nomination really boils down to two elements. The first is allowing residential within this CBC unit. Right now, we are currently recommended for commercial mixed use, but it does not specifically allow residential. It talks about commercial, though, at a fairly high level scale of 4 to 8 stories. There's 2 existing office buildings there that already exist, 6 and 8 stories there. The nominator has actually acquired those additional properties as a potential transition to the north, and we're open to talking about how that transition works. Our nomination reflects our first cut at it, but it is by no means the final answer from our particular perspective. So with that, I'll jump into our presentation, and I'll keep it pretty short here because I know we're don't want to run too long tonight. So let me go ahead and share that if I can. There we go. All right. Hopefully it doesn't have little gray boxes. I know sometimes I've been running into that.
It does. David, do you want me to try it out on my end?
Let me, there, I'll try to shift it over and we'll just go from there. Little Road Turnpike, this is the site again. These 10 acres are actually everything we control. And I'm here today on behalf of Nicholas Development, which is a development arm from a gentleman named Mehdi, who is on the call with me as well, who has been able to put these sites together and begin to think about it comprehensively. This is what the existing planning and zoning are, just to give everybody a sense. On the zoning side, it really talks about commercial zoning, C6 zoning, which is again, allows up to 8 stories and is a significant benefit. On the comprehensive plan side, we are part of the Annandale CBC. It is the westernmost end. It is a gateway location and talks about mid-rise and structured parking on this side of the CBC. The C6 areas are the red areas, or what's currently in the CBC. The R2 or the green areas are the zone ones that we had acquired. Those green areas are what we think where the discussion about the transition is happening and what our proposal talks about in terms of how that might work. Here's the site again. I will say these 2 office buildings are frankly fairly depreciated, as might be expected with COVID. And frankly, even before that, there's been a lot of pressure on suburban office. Realistically, these buildings are running at 50% vacancy currently, and we're struggling with how to make that work in the future. We are looking at even potentially adaptive reusing these buildings, but for residential, but we're not sure what the right answer is. Again, where office is successful is where there's better amenities closer by. And that's what this proposal really looks at trying to create. I'll go ahead and mention this. This is just a concept where we would have parking below grade. We'd introduce low scale residential to transition to the buildings. We would keep building C and building F and adaptively use them as the existing buildings with some retail on the ground floor, some retail here, a new retail strip here with a little bit of office over it, and then potential street connections. We're not sold on any of these street connections. These are just concepts we wanted to introduce in terms of creating that sense of place, creating a meaningful opportunity in the site. In this particular scenario, our anchor would be this building, retail space A, which would be sized to accommodate a grocery store in this scenario. But we think that's one of the retail that does work in the future and could really work well on the site. But again, we're open to where that location might be. I think what the emphasis here is the street grid. the variety connections and the variety of uses, the introduction of structured parking and how that structured parking might be screened. That's really where we spent our time. Jumping forward, this shows just the buildings above, residential, office. For example, building F, though, could be adaptively used for residential in the future as well. This just shows office here, how that might work over the retail on that portion of the main street. Again, as you keep going up the floors. These are some of the images, though, that I really want to draw your attention to. It is creating that sense of place. It is creating a living room here on the west end of Annandale that we really want to have the tools to be able to do. And frankly, the commercial only recommendation that we have right now just doesn't get us there. There is significant framework established in terms of height and format of the particular uses envisioned in the comprehensive plan. We just want to be able to introduce residential into that mix as well, which we think is key for any of these type of areas to be created. Again, samples for that type of space, that common area, the types of streetscapes, the pedestrian-friendly environment that we're hoping to create. That also helps drive successful retail and drive successful public spaces. Post-COVID, it'll be interesting to see how those can be envisioned, but we have some opportunity to do that here. This gives you for the sense of scale of how the residential might work over some of this retail or the office over the retail. We absolutely want to emphasize high quality architecture. That's the most interesting part of this. And frankly, something that we think is missing in Annandale to help create that sense of place. I'll leave my presentation there because I do want to leave as much room for discussion as possible. But Mehdi, if there's anything else you wanted to add, please do. Otherwise, we're happy to answer your questions. Thank you. Mehdi, are you going to say something?
I can't. I can't unmute myself.
You're unmuted, Mehdi.
We can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Because I tried to push the button, it didn't do anything. We appreciate the opportunity and thank you for everyone spending your evening with us here tonight. We try not to keep you too long. I feel that this development could actually start igniting some additional development in the area. The front building, we have already started vacating it and pushing those tenants to the rear, bigger building, so we can open up for a residential, perhaps tower here. And most of the site would be convenient retail, fast casual restaurants, lots of public spaces, open up, create a nice environment so it can both be a pleasant place. It would be in a way similar to Mosaic. And I like that complex a lot. And as you could see, there's lots of staggered retail locations all around. And I think this could bring it together, and actually some of the other properties are showing some interest to follow our lead in developing. And we just like, this is a concept. We love to hear what your thoughts are and direct us in the right direction so we can move forward as per your wishes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you to staff and to the nominators for the presentations. To start task force discussion on this, I'm going to recognize Donna Jacobson.
Thank you. I live about 2 miles away from this off Lafayette Village Drive. I just want to make it known, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with this area, but I know the intersection there at Hummer and Little River Turnpike and the intersection at Woodland Road and Little River Turnpike are both extremely bad intersections at this point in time and have a tremendous amount of traffic. I live down Lafayette Village, which goes through the Hummer Road down Lafayette Village, and there's houses and townhouses and everything further down. And we have a tremendous difficulty getting out of that intersection at this point in time, getting out of our development. So we are incredibly concerned about the amount of new traffic that this would bring. And actually, I have a number of questions, but first of all, I would like to have that addressed if possible.
Sure, Donna, it's a great question. It's a question, obviously we share as well. The ability to get out of any site is what's going to drive its success. I will say, from a density perspective, we're not asking for really any increase in density at this point. What we're asking is just the introduction of retail, as well as how to make the transition work to the north. Right now, the plan calls for 8-story commercial across the 5 acres that are within the CBC. So introducing residential is going to reduce the traffic by introducing a mix of uses. But absolutely, as part of the second phase, which staff and Barton had talked about earlier, we would roll up our sleeves and figure out those specific intersections, get those counts, and figure out what needs to be done at those locations.
I'm under the impression that you're planning for 1,803 parking spaces. Is that correct?
That's just a parking number that's in there if you follow the county ordinance.
How many parking spaces are there at this point?
It's surface parked. The county code requires 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of office. So whatever that equals is probably what has to be on the site today.
So basically, though, you're going to have a lot of increased vehicle traffic, increased parking there, probably from what you have at this point.
Oh, yes, absolutely. This is a surface parked suburban office building versus a mixed use facility with structured parking. Absolutely, there's going to be a difference from today.
So obviously there'll be more traffic going through those areas too.
Well, compared to what exists on the ground today, yes, but from a comprehensive plan perspective, no.
Well, from what exists today,
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I may not be reading this correct either, but I thought it said 1.5 parking spaces for each residential unit.
We're not proposing any changes to any parking ratios. The current county requirement for a multifamily building is 1.6 spaces per unit for a multifamily unit. We wouldn't propose on changing that or looking at that until we rolled up our sleeves and got through the process and talked about zoning.
But I don't understand 1.5 or 1.6 spaces because usually residential units, you have at least 2 cars, 2 drivers. So sure. I don't. Where would those extra cars be parked?
No.
Would they be parked?
No. Yeah, the 0.6. You're right. People don't drive 0.6 of a car. That's a fair point. In the county terms, an apartment building with structured parking is likely going to be 70 to 80% studios and 1-bedrooms, and maybe a few 2-bedrooms. And the 1.6 is a county-wide policy intended to ensure there's adequate parking. It applies whether or not you have transit accessibility. It applies whether or not you have other parking restrictions in place. So we have to meet that standard in terms of providing our parking on site. And so it will be a mix of visitor spaces, dedicated spaces for each unit, and some feedback in the lease on the ability to control that.
Now, I know with us, I'm in a townhouse development, and a number of the townhouse owners end up renting out the townhouses. So we have 2 or 3 people living in the townhouse, and they each have cars. In this type of location, if you only have 1.6 spaces, then you have basically 2 cars or at least 1 car per unit that's going to have to go into the surrounding neighborhoods to find parking. And those neighborhoods already have parking problems.
It's a fair point.
May I mention something? Thank you for your comment. We appreciate it. One of the advantages of being in a mixed-use development is in the morning when offices are residing there, then some of the tenants' residentials are perhaps gone. So the amount of parking used, it is a lot more efficient, and the traffic to and from the site is substantially balanced throughout the day and evening. So it's not in offices in the past when the cities were all just office buildings, everybody's rushing to the city and at night everybody empties it up. So it's good for safety, for parking, for traffic. A mixed use, I believe it's a better choice rather than off. If we built all offices, then during the day, you would need similar amount of parking spots for an office, but they would all come within the 8-10 hours during the day. Go in and go out at night, it's going to be all empty. And we can work within it. We'll have traffic studies and parking studies to make sure, obviously, that we're balanced.
But then what happens at night when everyone comes home and you only have the 1.5 parking places, but you may have 2 to 3 cars? Where do they park? And are they going to park in the surrounding neighborhoods?
Well, I think what Mehdi was getting at is with the office as a mixed use environment, there's probably an opportunity to share parking as well. And it's something I think we can take advantage of in this situation. So when those office users don't need their spaces, there may be an opportunity to allow the residential users to use those for overnight guests and visitor parking as well to help accommodate that.
Okay,
I have another question then, and that is,
Go ahead,
are there going to be any type of restrictions on the residential part not being able to use them for short-term rentals, such as Airbnbs and so forth?
That's fairly typical in most financing documents today. As you may be aware, the county also has a pretty strict Airbnb ordinance that says you cannot rent more than 60 days a year without having to go get a permit, and it can't be in certain multifamily buildings like this. So that ability's been severely curtailed, both by the private side in terms of how these are financed, and then secondarily with the county's adoption of their new Airbnb ordinance.
Okay.
Okay,
Are there other?
Go ahead.
Are there other? Donna, let me just ask the other task force members. We'll come back after the public comment. Are there other task force members? Joshua, your hands up. Barbara, we'll get to you next.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm wondering about this expansion of the CBC, and the county really seems to want to limit the intrusion into the surrounding neighborhoods. So what if instead of an expansion, there was just simply a rezoning of those areas outside of the CBC, perhaps to R8 as it is on the other side of the street?
I mean, Josh, we'd be open to that, to how that transition works. I think it's a great question. We actually, and this gets back to a little bit what Donna raised, the reason we acquired those properties is because we knew we'd have to make a transition if we ever redeveloped the primary buildings. On top of that, we were running into issues with the splitting up of those buildings through Airbnb and people parking in our parking lot, and we were running into issues. So this allowed us to help control that as well. But I think your suggestion, Josh, would be something we'd be open to, absolutely.
Barbara?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My question is regarding the availability of public transportation in that area, and whether or not that could be further studied to increase bus routes or other public transportation options in that area.
I think absolutely. I think the ability of us to expand transit options here is critical, especially bus service, but even links to the Annandale CBC proper. We'd love to be able to explore links to there and then capitalize on our access directly to the Beltway as well. So yes, is the short answer.
Vinod, you had your hand up.
Yes, looking at your document, you're proposing around 600 residential units, right? 575.
Correct. That's what that form shows, the exercise and how it might work.
I personally think it's a good investment in the community. The schools in the areas are already crowded. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, look, I used to live in the Falls Church High School District, so certainly familiar with to the north of here, how they've run into some problems. I know they're doing some investment there. I will say, to the county's credit, they have a formula that derives how many students are anticipated from a particular development. And I will say the mid-rise multifamily is much lower than a traditional even townhome in that regard. A townhome generates roughly half a student per unit. A multifamily unit generates roughly a tenth of a student per unit. And that's based on a county-wide average. So the impact is less than a straight one-for-one basis. On top of that, we would look to provide a capital contribution to the schools, figure out how expansion would work, as well as work with the school district so that they can begin to plan whenever this property is ultimately rezoned in order to accommodate that growth. You know, realistically, if you told me today when the first bit of growth might turn, that's probably at the earliest 5 years from now.
And if you don't mind, how much capital contribution are you talking to the schools? Just a number?
Yeah, I mean, the capital contribution is based on this is what they literally do. They take the number of students in the school system, divide it by the capital value so they take the value of all the schools, divide it by the number of students in there, and that generates a number. So that number is roughly $12,000 a student is what the capital value of all the schools in the county is. So if you add students to the school district, they ask that you contribute $12,000. So that's what we would be doing is $12,000 per student generated to the Fairfax County Public Schools for students in this particular pyramid. For capital contribution for facilities in this particular pyramid.
I think you're on mute, Mr. Machowski.
Force members with questions or comments?
Yeah, if I could, Marty, just first of all, I'm just encouraged that we're trying to get that look, and there was mentioned in there about this trying to be somewhat of a mosaic area. I don't think people from out of town drive down Little River Turnpike in Annandale, and we certainly don't have the wow factor as they drive down Little River Turnpike, and neither is Charming ever used. And so anything that would give us an extreme makeover to refresh what's along Little River Turnpike and to start bringing us up a little bit, certainly encouraged. So appreciate you looking at that, and I appreciate your cityscapes also. And I realize that's best case and may not be what we're going to be seeing, but I think the thought behind it is to make that mixed use, make it pedestrian friendly, have restaurants and that. And I think that maybe Annandale will become a destination point as opposed to just driving down Little River Turnpike and all our gas stations fill up and then move on. But I do have a question though, and that is, part of it is my knowledge, the two residential properties that I assume that you own them outright. There are not just bids on those, and that you hope if this moves forward that you then close on them, that you own them now. And is there any issue Donna brought up about parking, and I think those two adjacent to Hummer Road, if I caught it correctly, you're going to make that a parking area, a multi-story parking. Is that any problem with zoning? Thank you.
Well, the zoning would be the next step in this process after the work program and if we get adopted on the comprehensive plan. But the long story short is, yes, we own the 10 acres that we've nominated that were in front of you today. So we have consolidated those 5 pieces that are not part of the CBC, as well as the 4 parcels that are in the CBC proper.
Are there other questions? I have one question is either for the nominator or for the staff, because at least as part of the staff recommendation is this notion of not expanding and going beyond the line for the central business district. When was that established? Is that 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years ago? What's sort of the history, the brief history on that?
It's decades old. The CBC, it's been there for a while.
I would defer to Clara. I mean, the short answer is when the CBC was adopted, I want to say 2015, Clara?
It would have been reaffirmed at that time.
Yeah.
The Annandale CBC was expanded to include commercial properties along Little River Turnpike for both land units G1 and G2. At that time, what was important to the community was that we only include those commercial uses and there not be commercial encroachment into the residential
So this was
neighborhood.
then most recently looked at, reaffirmed, whatever the word is, in 2015.
Yes, but not the first time that was in
Right,
the plan.
I understand. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Are there other task force members with comments or questions before we open this up?
Yeah, Marty.
Go ahead.
All right, first question for staff. The question about the idea of to expand the CBC or not expand the CBC. And I have a question about the proffer impact on that. Because I know we've got anti-proffer, there was an anti-proffer law that was passed, and CBCs are exempted from that law. If we do not expand the CBC, is there but we do additional residential development here. What is the impact on being able to recoup that those proffers for schools, according to the anti-proffer law?
Right. So that proffer, and David might be able to say more about this, but the proffer legislation was revised. And the state of affairs now is that for any property, whether it's exempt from the proffer legislation or not, the county is able to accept reasonable proffers. There's now a process for that where the party offering the proffer can sign and indicate that it's a reasonable proffer. David, would you say that's?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is, Jeff, you can opt in outside of the CBC to the proffer law. So you can opt in to agree to additional proffers, exactly how Clara was phrasing it. And that's obviously what we would intend to do here. To be honest, the proffer bill largely got changed by, frankly, builders in Fairfax who felt that the proffer law that did get passed didn't give us enough flexibility to address what we heard as community concerns.
Okay, thank you. I hadn't heard that update, so I appreciate it. So just to be clear, so if we did not include the expand the CBC, you would still intend to provide proffers for any residential development that would impact schools?
Correct.
Okay. So my next question is, I'm a little bit concerned about the lack of buffer space. I understand you saying that this is kind of a very preliminary, plans, and really what our I think of the focus of our what we're supposed to be focused on is the use, not so much the actual form that you're proposing. But since you proposed it, it's hard to ignore, and the lack of buffer space is awfully concerning. Can you speak to that, and how you might be able to address, if we might be able to address that through a work program?
No, I think that's a great question, Jeff. And my hope is that we could roll up our sleeves in the work program and work with the community on how to make that transition work. I think transition is the key word. And, right now the CBC sort of envisions a wall. My hope is with these properties that we acquired, we can begin to make that a true transition from the single family and what the CBC proper is. What that form takes, what heights, what uses, we're open to have that discussion.
If I may interject, this is Mehdi Falsafi, with your permission. If you look at our plans now, when we are one of the reasons of purchasing the properties adjacent within the residential area, we wanted to create that buffer zone. So if you look at it, it starts with 2 to 4 stories adjacent to the residential, and all of those units will be residential. And on the interior, we will have a parking structure that's basically surrounded by the residential units. So it could be 1/1 type of units there, and they could actually exit the units directly onto the streets, but the parking would be behind them, covered up. And then as we get to the center and we get closer to Little River Turnpike, the heights will increase a little bit. And we've made sure that the entrances to the retail area is not interfering as much with the residential, so keeps the traffic completely away from it. But we're open. Obviously, we will work with the community to make sure to bring in, we'll keep the style of the neighborhood, we'll keep the residential units in those areas. So the traffic will come from behind to go in, but the little park, you see the swimming pool looking thing. So we would work together to make sure there's some nice public areas in those, make it look like a streetscape.
Yeah, so that pool behind what's labeled as B, those, what do you currently have proposed for those building heights?
The pool, those, it starts in that area, it steps up from 2-story to 4 stories, and where it's hiding the parking behind them. And to be frank with you, I don't like the pool there. I like that to be like more of a courtyard, so people can walk into those units and walk out of them. But if they're driving, they would drive from behind. Yeah, if you look at it here, you would see. I would like to have perhaps the pool to go on the top floor, on the 4th floor, 6th floor, some of the buildings behind where it's facing more of a Little River term. But we'll work that within the neighbors and trying to see how we could work with that.
So those amenities could potentially move on to the parking structure B and
Absolutely,
where the
yes.
B is or the D is.
Yes, because the B and D, actually we're connecting them with a tunnel on the upper levels, so they can share some of the amenities there, and it would create a nice archway to the entrance. You could see in this dark purple areas how we are entering the site there, and with the trees lined and some surface parking, some expansion of restaurants, things of that sort.
I guess last bit here is you're currently zoned, the area that is part of the residential is currently zoned R2. What would you be stepping up to for that?
Right. So I think realistically, it's either a PDC, planned development commercial, or planned development housing. I think with the amount of office we're talking in retail here, probably planned development commercial, which allows residential as a secondary use.
Thanks, Jeff. Other task force members with questions or comments before we go to the public hearing? Joshua?
Yeah. So why was the rest of the subunit G1, the rest of that block with the, on the corners, why was that not included in this nomination?
That's a great question, Josh. It's something that I think we struggle with on a lot of these nominations. I submitted the one for Dar al-Hijra, the Islamic Center, where we did expand to include, 2 or 3 properties that we didn't own, and that owner had also made a nomination too. And so, there's somewhat reluctance to nominate property you don't own. I think in a perfect world, should we probably round out the block from a planning perspective? Yeah, I think we should. But, from our perspective as the property owner who took the time and effort to consolidate the 10 acres, we'd rather look at it as our property has been nominated.
Okay. Other task force member comments or questions before we open it up? I would just note that Mosaic is a model that many proposals reference. It is a wonderful model to copy. I know we've probably all been there. It's always a challenge because circumstances vary from place to place. Before we open it up to the public, I want to just remind everyone we had received 2 comments prior to the meeting. One from Mary Wolf. As an individual, he's a neighbor of the property. She provides one perspective, and We also received a letter from Susan Jolly. Susan, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Susan's the president of the Hummer Woods Civic Association, and I would just note, Susan, in your letter, you talk about the challenges with public participation under this format, and I think all the task force members would agree with you on that. But Graham, with that, why don't you open it up to members of the public?
All right, so Sylvia Welch, you're the first speaker. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Welcome. Yes, we can hear you, Sylvia. Welcome, and please go ahead.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, and appreciate the presentation about the master plan. So I'm Sylvia. I'm a local neighbor, literally 5 minute, actually less than 5-second walk right on Wood Palace there. So I'm very familiar with the site location and how traffic works. And I have a few concerns and questions that I just want to talk. So really quickly, I'm not sure if the time frame has been discussed. So maybe touch base in terms of when it's going to start. Is it going to be in different phases? When's the completion date proposed? And the other topic is Woodland Road. So that is very busy, as well as like Hummer Road as well. A lot of people cut through the current site. It's very dangerous on that road. And as you see, I'm not sure if you noticed, but Woodland Road is different than Hummer in terms that there's only one main egress. So should any emergencies happen, there's only one exit way. And I see that on your master plan. You have the big service area really highlighted on Woodland Road. So to me, that's a really big red flag, and that needs to be addressed. And let's see, I just referring to my notes here. I'm open to looking at other master plan options. I do like the idea of having a mixed use development. That site is would love to have a little bit more excitement there, but it should really be addressed and be very limited in terms of how many more people you're bringing into the space, because traffic is a huge concern. And in terms of also safety as well. We already have a lot of people walking from different neighborhoods, just walking through that area. And I can tell you there's that intersection right there. I've been in many close accidents just because it's just very busy. You have the busy McDonald's, and then you have other trucks coming in as a pass through. So I would love to hear more about your goals.
Sure. Sylvia, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sylvia. David, let's listen to the comments. If you'd like to respond to all of them at the end, let's move through that. Graham, who's the next?
All right, the next speaker is Anna Darmati.
Hello.
Hi, Anna, go ahead.
So I also am a neighbor on Hummer Road. I'm about a quarter of a mile from the development in question. And I have several issues and concerns, so I'll go as quick as I can. First of all, I really wanted to reiterate a lot of what Ms. Jacobson said at the beginning about traffic, and actually what Ms. Walsh just said as well. In addition to the increase of traffic that I do believe this will bring, because even with the argument of it being mixed residential and commercial, that means you have people coming and going from that area at rush hour. So I do think it'll double down, especially at rush hour time. Hummer Road is already a main thoroughfare and a main cut through for a lot of traffic, to an extremely dangerous level. In the last 6 months, we've had a fatal hit and run accident with a pedestrian, and we've had 2 cars be completely totaled. Just while parking on the street, because nobody respects the laws there. They're just speeding through there. And especially with rush hour and people rushing in and out of that area, I'm just worried it'll be that much more dangerous, because it's already really dangerous. Not to mention the fact we've had a fatal pedestrian hit and run. We've talked about that area as being the new Mosaic, not super conducive to pedestrians as is with the traffic pattern the way it is right now. I think it would just lead to more fatal incidents. Or near fatal incidents. Secondarily, with all the increase in the paved structures, with increasing all the parking spots, I'm concerned about the environmental impacts with increasing a lot of paved structures and a lot more cars in the area. Just the runoff from that is going to go up significantly and affect all the the natural wonder in that area. Acatink Creek is right there, and that runs off into Manassas Gap Park as well as Hidden Oaks Park. And I'm just concerned about the environmental implications of that additional runoff from just the presence of significant more number of vehicles with a large parking structure. My other concern was what was brought up by Mr. Longo about the buffer space. That's a huge concern for all the residents in the area. We really do want to keep as good of a buffer space as we can there, and I'm concerned that this proposal will possibly start encroaching on Hummerwood's area more than the residents would like. I actually do find someone had commented previously about wanting that area to be more charming. While I understand there is some charm of Mosaic, I do actually think Hummerwoods, as we refer to it, is already extremely charming. And I'm actually concerned something like this would actually decrease the charm of the area. And I know we mentioned Susan Jolie. She actually couldn't be on the call tonight. She's actually the president of the Hummerwood Civic Association. We do have a group that communicates about issues and concerns like this, and she couldn't be here tonight and asked for other people to join, but I did want to just voice that the official president of the Hummerwood Civic Association is also against this proposal, because we do have a lot of concerns, but I think that kind of summarizes at least my biggest ones.
Thank you, Anna. Graham, next.
Next is Andrew Levitz. Andrew, can you hear us? Andrew, can you hear us?
I was remuting me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Fantastic. Sorry about that. Hey, thanks very much for everybody letting me address the board, and thank you, Mr. Gill and Mr. Falsafi, for your presentation. So I live directly and exactly across the street from the parcels that we're talking about. My house is in every picture that you've shown this evening. In fact, when you drew the line around the property, you drew it across my driveway. I scrimped and saved to move my family into this area. I had to ask the bank for variance in order to get the money that I needed in order to purchase this house, but I purchased it here because I wanted to move into a single family neighborhood full of leafy green trees and neighbors. The parcels that Mr. Falsafi have purchased, the residential parcels of green space, those were my neighbors. That was what made this house bearable, was that I was not on the edge of a huge residential and commercial development. I am very concerned that I am becoming your buffer zone. I have 2 small children. I'm a disabled Navy veteran. I have 2 children under the age of 4. Everyone has already talked about the parking and the traffic. It's already impossible because people use the rear exit from this parking lot as it is to avoid the light on Hummer and Little River Turnpike. So people are already whipping through there, and it's already a challenge to keep an eye on my rambunctious 3.5-year-old daughter. This is going to increase traffic at least 2- or 3-fold, and probably more, to say nothing of the fact that the house that I live in now, as a house, with a single-family residence house surrounded by other single-family residence houses, is suddenly about to be across the street from residential towers and office space and more retail. It's not what I signed up for. And while I appreciate the desire to turn Annandale into a vibrant urban area, look, I like Mosaic a lot. I specifically don't live there. I've chosen to live in a neighborhood, and I'm afraid that the neighborhood is going to evaporate on my back at the expense of my property values and at the expense of the safety of my children. I am very, very concerned about this proposal. I love the pictures, but that's, fantasy. The reality is that I'm here with my family in this neighborhood, and I would be alarmed if the board would consider, capital contributions for the schools over the needs and the desires of the residents who actually live here now. And I would encourage you not to let this proposal go forward so that we don't have to continue having this conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity to be heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Graham, next.
Next is Glenn Bonard. Glenn?
I'm here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the group. I live at 3705 Linda Lane, which I'm not sure how you describe the neighborhood, but it's part of the Hummer Woods Association. We have a lot of cut-through traffic already going from people who are going north on Hummer Road and wanting to turn left on Gallows, and they find it much quicker to drive through our neighborhood and avoid the light Gallows. If this property gets developed the way it's suggested, we're going to get cut-through traffic going the other way. They're going to come down Gallows and avoid the light at Gallows and Hummer, come through our neighborhood and get onto Hummer. So that's a real concern for us. The other thing is, in 2015, the comprehensive plan or whatever it was reapproved, and the existing restrictions, which purposefully stated that the commercial area should not be expanded to the north, we don't see any reason why it should be. The Hummer Woods neighborhood is very residential, very residential, very pretty. When one compares this development to Mosaic, I think it's missing a couple of points. Number one, Mosaic was developed in an area that wasn't residential. It was primarily commercial, industrial to start with. Didn't encroach on any residential neighborhoods, and it was just using property that was appropriate for that development. It's a nice idea that this could turn into a Mosaic, but there isn't enough space there to really do it. Not anything near. So that's, I don't think that's realistic. It might sound like a good selling point. I understand that the property is zoned commercial, and I would suggest that it be that the group suggests that it be rezoned, the existing commercial property be rezoned to allow mixed use, but there's no need to expand that going north. And several people have commented on the traffic. The traffic is a problem in several directions. It's a problem going down Hummer towards Little River Turnpike. That light, particularly during rush hour, has a tremendous backup. There's also a major problem coming off the Beltway going from the Beltway towards Hummer Road. Even during the daytime, it sometimes takes 2 traffic light cycles to turn left from Little River Turnpike onto Hummer Road. I mean, that whole intersection is just incredibly busy, and I would hate to see it turn into what Little River Turnpike and that road just off the Beltway, off the Beltway is. That intersection there, it's always a disaster.
Glenn, could I ask you to sum up, Glenn?
Yeah, finally, I'm concerned about the groundwater quality. Many people in our neighborhood are still on wells, and so additional runoff and stuff is going to impact us, the quality of the groundwater. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Glenn. I get Brian, before we go ahead, just let me ask again, commenters to try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or under. And if there are others who have spoken to the issues that you'd like to speak to, please reference that. We can move through this. Graham, who's next?
Next is Sabad Sundaram. Sabad, can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for giving us the opportunity to address you. I also, my family and I live on Woodland Road and a few houses down. We also have a child, and we have tried several times to get solutions to the traffic that goes down the street because it is very dangerous here. But we've been told that there's really nothing we can do. So it is very dangerous for our kids here. The other one of the other speakers alluded to the point of egress. This is the only way for us to get out if there is any kind of disaster. And I want to give you a specific example for why we cannot get out in time. In the mornings when I try to go to work, not during pandemic times, but in normal times, there is a McDonald's right at the end of Woodland Road. People will go to the driveway, to the drive-through for that McDonald's, and then they will back up into the service road and into Little River Turnpike. So anybody trying to get out of Woodland Road can take up to 2 minutes and more for us to try to get out of that light because we're blocked. I don't know how you solve that problem. That is a problem in the morning, and that is a problem in the evening when I come back because they are there for dinner. That McDonald's ensures that that area is one of the most dangerous intersections that repeatedly I've been told make it unsafe for any kids to be around there and for us to be driving in that neighborhood. We do not have the public transportation infrastructure for us to not drive is the other problem. The buses are very infrequent and they don't get to the subway on time. So I would love to see something happen in that office complex, but I would really appreciate that we don't expand that area, and I would really appreciate if something would be done about the really dangerous intersection that we face. One last point, there's an Annandale Swim and Tennis Club. When they used to hold meets, we had parking all over our street. It didn't matter what they were told that they couldn't park, or they would park all over Woodland Road. We know what it is like for people to park on the street without authorization. So if you're going to increase parking in this area, you will have to do something about people not parking in front of our houses. Thank you.
Thank you very much for keeping that at exactly 3 minutes. I appreciate that. Graham, next.
Next is David Lewis. David.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate all the info tonight. Appreciate it. I've said what Donna has said, what everybody else has said about traffic is totally on target. I appreciate the idea about something like a mosaic district. The extreme difference between the ability to widen down there, it makes a big difference. But I don't see where that area down in Hummer is really going to be able to be widened. It's a terrible intersection, it really is. I'm right across the street from Susan Jolly's house, and my road is already the only cut through from Annandale Road to Hummer. It's a significant cut through just by itself. I just appreciate the idea, but I'd like to not have more significant development in that area, and that's all I really have to say.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, David. Graham?
There are no additional speakers.
No additional speakers. Okay. David, do you want to have a minute or two just to generally respond to the
comments? Yeah, I'll take. Thanks, Martin. I'll take just a couple minutes to touch on things. What I heard was time frames. For those who don't know, you still have to go through. I apologize. Is my microphone really scratching? No, it's all right. But
so yeah,
we still have.
If all attendees and all panelists can mute themselves, other than David, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
So just real quick on timing, if this does get accepted to the work program, there's a potential 12-month process to actually adopt a comprehensive plan. That comprehensive plan would still need to be implemented through a subsequent rezoning, which is another public hearing process. So from where I sit today, realistically, given tenants, market conditions, I think it's 5 years before anything could even begin to be constructed on the site. We hear everybody about traffic. It's important to us. And, traffic calming and traffic circulation would be key for us as well to be successful. That's what retail thrives on. On the environmental side, we'd expect to become LEED silver at a minimum for any of these buildings. So these would be environmentally friendly buildings and certainly an improvement over the existing surface parking lot. And I'll just say this, I really do appreciate the Hummerwood Civic Association coming out tonight and testifying. If this does move forward, we'd love to come and meet with your community, hear from you directly on a lot of these concerns so that we can get that feedback incorporated into our process.
If I may.
Thank you, David. Are there other, before we go to a motion, are there task force members who have further comments? Donna?
Yeah, I'll just like to make a quick comment. I'll just like to say I do have concerns about this nomination. To me, the land use application should promote stability of the neighboring residential areas, and I'm not sure that this falls into that category.
Task force members have any comments before we go to a motion?
Yes, I do, Marty.
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm struck by the scale and opportunity of this proposal with 10 acres at a gateway to a business center at the intersection of major surface transportation. It presents tremendous potential. Now, I'm not ready to wave the flag and call it the next Mosaic, but it certainly has the potential to spark activization and realization of all of the comp plan and central and business district planning that I'm familiar with in the county. It is also particularly critical that Mason District, which is so often critiqued for lagging in any kind of progressive development, have the opportunity presented by 10 acres to at least develop the plan, which is the stage we're at now. I'm sympathetic to all the issues raised, but these are generally addressed in the zoning and design stage, not right now. And I was frankly, while I have tremendous respect for the staff and defer often to their recommendations, I thought that not advancing this to the next stage is a lost opportunity to truly explore the potential for this, not only as a gateway from the west to Annandale, but also as a new opportunity for Mason District.
If I may interject if I may answer a couple of the questions.
Please let us move on. David
Sure.
had an opportunity to do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are there other task force members who'd like to comment before I ask for a motion?
Yes.
Marty.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Robert.
Go ahead.
Okay. To kind of follow up on what the fellow member Bill was saying, as a former person who lived over at Lafayette Forest, which is just down that intersection, headed the opposite direction than where my fellow member lives in Lafayette, the other end of the townhomes there, this community in this area is currently served, but albeit with increased traffic, where we have to go further down the highway to a grocery store. We have to go further down into a number of other areas. So seeing a development come along that's going to say, hey, let's look at how we can make this fit to the existing people who are here, as well as adding in some additional amenities and residential units. I understand completely the concern of some of the residential neighbors, right? We struggle with this as a task force often, the my backyard versus your backyard versus what are the needs for the county and for this particular part of the development in 20 to 30 to 40 years out. I have to admit that seeing that part right inside the Beltway, if you're going to think about where do you transform, buildings, where do you transform traffic, where do you transform population density, it makes sense to put it as close to the Beltway as possible for the ease of getting in and out of access there. We're already on major transit with bus routes. We're already in a great location to help alleviate some of the standard traffic that may be generated in other locations. So I just want to echo those sentiments and kind of throw those points out to the task members of, if we don't start doing something here, how far behind does that part of Annandale and does that part of the county and Mason District continue to lag? Thank you.
Other task force members
Yeah, Marty. All right, so I agree with a lot of things that Bill and Robert just said. I do have concerns about buffering and some of the traffic impacts, but I think I want to work through them in a work program. Specifically regarding the some of the traffic in the transit, something that I am an advocate of is bus rapid transit along Little River Turnpike. It's not currently in any of the planning horizons for the county, but I think Little River Turnpike and Annandale in general would be well served by a bus rapid transit line that connects the Merrifield, so Dunloring down the Dunloring Metro Station down to Merrifield, to the new Innova complex that hops on over to down to Little River Turnpike. So it goes down Gallows, then it hops on the Beltway, goes over down Little River Turnpike, and over potentially over to the Lincolnia CBC. I think if folks are really concerned about transit, this is something that you should start raising your voices on and ask for that to start being put into the plan. One question for staff: if we do put this on the work program in a pandemic, how do we adequately assess traffic impacts when there's not as much traffic?
It's $1 million question, Jeff. I think it's definitely something that we'll have to think through. I don't know that we have an immediate answer tonight that will suffice. But ideally, given the time frame of the work program, that's something that we can consider, and fingers crossed, our current situation will change and be much better by next year.
Okay.
Are there other task force members who'd like to make comments before I ask for a motion? Alice?
Yeah, just want to echo what Bill said. I think this could be a great opportunity for our district. But then again, we've heard all the concerns from the residents. So I think we just, if this moves forward, we need to think outside the box, come up with creative solutions where we can both address the concerns of the residents. For example, the environmental concern. David Gill had then mentioned that the buildings will probably be LEED silver, and that's a great thing. So I think we need to just be open-minded and see if we can think through this creatively. Thanks.
Any other comments by task force members?
Yeah, Marty.
Josh.
Go ahead, Josh.
Okay. Yeah, and I think for me, I guess I'm trying to look at the big picture here that Fairfax County keeps making jobs. We're making twice as many jobs than as we are like places for people to actually live. And so many of these housing units have been built in like Prince William and Loudoun counties. And these trends, work together to make terrible traffic issues in I-66 and 95. And then, as people drive towards a city that's that only makes traffic inside the Beltway worse too. So, if we're not making, opportunities for people to construct more places for people to live, it just drives up housing prices and makes it even more difficult for people to afford housing.
Other task force members with comments before I ask for a motion? Is there a motion that the task force approve moving the nomination into the work program?
I'll motion. Karen?
Karen makes the motion. Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Second motion is seconded. Is there a discussion on the motion? No further discussion. Let me just say that I think the comments Bill and Alice and others have made are very well taken. Mixed-use development, quality mixed-use development is always something we look for. I am concerned about the precedent-setting nature of swallowing up adjoining residential land. We saw that proposed in one of our other nominations, and we opposed that one. This is obviously a different nomination, a different location with a different opportunity presented. But the notion of, even though the land has already been purchased, I understand that. The notion of expanding our commercial areas into residential neighborhoods, particularly one that we just, a boundary line we affirmed as little as 5 years ago. People have made decisions about buying homes there, about raising families there. And I would love to see all of those wonderful benefits we've being developed in that parcel on the corner of Hummer and Little River Turnpike and Woodland in a way that respects the integrity of the residential community and the decisions that people who live in that community have made to purchase there and to build a stake there. So those are just my comments. Are there other comments on the motion before I call for a vote?
I just want to point out, according to the diagram that I saw, in what's currently zoned residential, I only see residential uses being proposed in the areas that are already zoned residential.
No, that is true. Those are multifamily residential uses, if I'm correct.
Correct.
We are taking
I believe there's one commercial building on Hummer Road,
on Hummer Road
on an area that's
currently residential.
That's
I'd
currently
like to make a
residential.
final comment too about the buffering and about the transition from the residential areas there to this mosaic type development. Because the mosaic development is fine, except for it seems to be being squeezed into a small space with no transition area. And I think that's going to cause a problem. And I think it's going to cause a problem with the traffic, the parking, everything you can think of. So.
All right. Okay. Are there any other comments by task force members? Then the vote, let's do a roll call vote on the motion. There's a motion to approve, recommend, excuse me, that the nomination be included in the county, in the SSPA work program. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. We'll start from the top. Robert votes aye. Josh?
Aye.
Josh votes aye. Jeff?
Aye.
Votes aye. Alice?
Aye.
Alice votes aye. Barbara?
Aye.
Barbara votes aye. Dave? Dave, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Dave.
Aye.
Aye. Dave votes aye. Donna?
No.
Donna votes no. Bill?
Aye.
Aye. Ed?
Aye.
Ed votes aye. Bernard?
Aye.
Jan?
Aye.
Jan Keys votes aye. Karen?
Aye.
Karen votes aye, and I vote no. So that's 11 ayes and 2 nays. The recommendation of the task force is that this nomination move forward into the work program. Although I would encourage the nominator to seriously consider the concerns that have raised by neighbors in that process, and we'll look forward to seeing what the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors does on this one. Is there any other business tonight before the task force? Hearing none. Let me just, for myself, thank all of the task force members for participating in this process. It's been a trying one, a little bit difficult one, having to do it online. I've been thumbing back and forth on my iPad today to see who's with us. I didn't notice if Supervisor Gross joined us tonight. But I don't believe that she did. But I want to just thank the task force members as well as the staff for their hard work in keeping us informed and keeping us engaged and putting up with us as we stray from the narrow sort of dictates of what this phase was a little bit. And I want to thank task force members for working on the various nominations. The one in particular, obviously, that's most of concern to me is the church housing project on Route 7, and to allowing us to move, have a little bit extra time to think about that. Are there any task force members who'd like to say anything at this point before we adjourn? Michael, any closing comments from you?
I think you summed it up.
I would like to thank the chair for his leadership in moving us down to a steadily shorter meeting time, and I'm pleased that we wrapped up before Labor Day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I second that.
Agreed. We didn't have to use that fourth meeting.
Mr. Machowski and Bill, I think you echoed everything that I was going to say. We sincerely thank each and every one of you for your time. We are very, very grateful, and I know this is a sacrifice for you, so we appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you all going into next year into the work program. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Thank you very much, everybody.
Is there a motion to, thank you, Meta. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 The motion is 3-2. Everyone, be safe, stay well. We'll see you
Bye.
soon. Enjoy the
Bye-bye.
weekend.
Thank you.
Labor Day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Have a